You're listening to the Doctor Is In podcast. This is the show where you get the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You'll also hear what works and what doesn't work so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started.
Hello, I'm Dr. Martin Jr.
And I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctor Is In podcast, and this is episode 121. And today we're going to continue a discussion that we started on our last episode, which is all about anti-aging. Now, we're actually going to make this a 3-part episode because next week we're actually going to share with you basically our best tips for anti-aging. You know, what you do, for example, every day, what I do every day, because, I mean, you hear it all the time. You look a lot younger than you are. You're active. Your brain's good. You got tremendous energy. You really practice everything you preach. So we're going to talk about real anti-aging recommendations in next week's episode. So today what we're going to do is we're going to continue the discussion, specifically what happens now hormonally as you age and why that matters and why knowing that can help you prevent a lot of this stuff, right? Last week we kind of shared with you our concept of anti-aging, which has to do more with living well as you age rather than just skin. Skin is a byproduct of doing the things that we recommend, but you can get all these facelifts and you can look young, and as we said, you could be the best looking person with dementia, or you could be the best looking person with sarcopenia, osteoporosis, and then have your quality of life be terrible. That's not anti-aging. Mm-hmm. Anti-aging is a complete package, and that's what we talked about last week. So last week, we looked at the two things that shrink as you age, your brain and your muscles. So if you haven't heard that podcast, go back last week and looked at episode 120, and we go through a lot of that. So today we're going to talk about some of the big changes that occur as you age with your hormones and why so many people have messed up hormones when they age. So let's talk about that. We wrote down a list of things just from the top of our head, hormones that change when you age. So we'll just go through them. Let's talk about each one. And then next week we'll talk about some solution to this, but we'll just kind of break them down one by one. You know, there's a lot of different interesting theories on aging, what happens as you age. And, you know, one of them has to do with as you get older, you become more insulin resistant. Your organs, your liver becomes more insulin resistant. Your brain becomes more insulin resistant, right? Every cell in your body becomes more insulin resistant, and that means they're just not nearly as effective as they used to be as well, right? One of the big things that happens naturally as you age is an increase in insulin resistance. Now, for a lot of you that are listening, you know what we mean by insulin resistance, but in case you're just joining us and you're not quite sure, there's basically what we call insulin resistance, and then on the flip side is what we call insulin sensitive. So what do we mean by that? Well, basically when a person is insulin resistant, their body has to make a lot more insulin just to do the same job that it used to do before with a little bit of insulin. And when you are insulin sensitive, that means that you don't need nearly as much insulin to get the job done. Now, insulin is a vital hormone, is very important. The problem that people have is when they end up making too much insulin over a long period of time, that's where all the problems start. And if you are insulin, that means that you need a lot more insulin to do the same job, which means that you have high circulating insulin all the time. Now, every time you eat food and your blood sugar levels go up, you're going to secrete insulin. Acute insulin secretion is normal. Yeah. Insulin's not a boogeyman. And I know a lot of times we talk so much against insulin, but what we're really talking about is high circulating insulin all the time, chronically elevated insulin levels. Every time you eat, your insulin levels are going to spike. That's normal. It's do they stay up for a long time after? Yeah. That's the problem, right?
They don't go away. They don't go away quickly, right? And that becomes a real issue.
So when you look at it from a perspective that as you age, you become more and more insulin resistant, then you want to make sure that you're not accelerating that process as you get older, right? You want to make sure that you're not making things worse by having a diet high in processed foods, high in crappy carbohydrates, high in crappy vegetable oils, those things. Also, since insulin resistance is not a good thing, insulin sensitivity is a very good thing. And, research has made crystal clear what kind of things makes you more sensitive to insulin. Muscle mass. It's funny. As you age, you lose muscle. As you lose muscle, you become more insulin resistant also, because muscle is a great way to become more insulin sensitive, right? Because muscle stores glycogen. The more muscle you have, the more sensitive to insulin, the more likely you are to have less problems with insulin, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So any discussion about the hormonal changes that occurs as you age really has to start with insulin. So now that we got that out of the way, we had to, people expect us.
Well, because it's a food hormone, right? I mean, we were always going to talk about food, and so insulin it's a normal reaction to food, but if you have high circulating insulin, like you say, we got to start there because it's something that you can control.
Which
right?
is why a very good anti-aging technique would be to keep insulin low, which would be to also make you more sensitive to insulin. So that's why we always talk about it, because you can't talk anti-aging without talking about insulin. All right, so now let's talk about one of the other things that happens as you age that is really fascinating, has to do with your microbiome. Now, the more that you and I read research, the more convinced you and I are that your microbiome is really another organ. We think of our liver, our brain, our lungs, our skin, gallbladder, and bowels, and all those things as organs. I'll tell you, I'm convinced that, within the next so many years, we're going to discover that our microbiome, our bacteria, is another organ. It behaves like an organ. And like any other organ, it can be unhealthy. You can have unhealthy lungs. You can have unhealthy heart. You can have an unhealthy brain. You can have an unhealthy organ in terms of your microbiome. And the unfortunate thing is, like your heart, if your heart's unhealthy, your whole body's unhealthy. If your brain's unhealthy, your whole body's unhealthy. If your lungs are unhealthy, it's pretty hard to be healthy. When your microbiome's unhealthy, your whole body's affected.
Yeah.
Every aspect.
Big time.
And what's interesting is, as you age, your bowels, right? So your bowels become more permeable. So what do we mean by that? Well, the ability that your bowels have to not allow junk to get through the walls of your bowels into your blood decreases. As you age, your bowels become more permeable. And why is that? Because your microbiome changes as you get older.
Yeah.
Which is why it was interesting. There was a study that showed that ridiculously healthy 90-year-olds had the same microbiome as people in their 30s. Yeah. Because what they know is, as you age, your microbiome, your bacteria content changes, and it's not for the better. So, anti-aging wise, it only makes sense that if you want to be one of those ridiculously healthy 90-year-olds, you want to make sure that your microbiome is healthy like a 30-year-old.
Yeah. And that's why we always talk about the importance of probiotics, and we'll talk about that, in terms of what you and I do. But think about this for a minute, too, because we always talk about what affects your microbiome, right? And when you think of aging, obviously, as you get older, everything changes to some extent. Come on. You just got to look in the mirror, right? I mean, like, if you don't believe in aging, look in the mirror. I look at pictures of me when I graduated in 1974. I just don't look the same anymore. Like, I try and do everything I can, but it happens, right? But think about one of the factors that, that just from a side point of view, when it affects your microbiome, medications, because,
yeah, and that's a big aspect
because of course, I would tell people, well, look, here's the, and I sometimes get in a little bit of not a war, but sort of I follow a lot of people online and Twitter, and they follow me and whatever. And sometimes we're back and forth with each other. And they go, well, what university are you a researcher at? I go, I'm at the University of People. I got patients, thousands of patients every year. And you know what? Here's what I find with seniors, and you and I talked about this off air. They come in, I'm not talking all of them, but a vast majority of the seniors I see, when they hit that 55, 60, whatever years old, before you know it, they're on medications. High blood pressure, statins, sleeping pills, and then they got to take another pill for their thyroid or whatever. And look, I don't even want to get into the discussion whether those are necessary or not. I'm just saying that changes your microbiome. Those medications have a negative effect. One of the side effects of medication, any medication, we always talked about antibiotics, anti-inflammatories. A lot of people are taking over-the-counter stuff and blah, blah, blah. We talk about that, what it does to you, and it causes a...
Well, it affects your organ, but your microbiome, right? It does. They affect
That's the organ that gets affected a lot by that medication, I'm telling you.
So, which is why next week we'll talk about how to counter the big things that happen as you age. And insulin resistance is a big thing that happens as you age, and also an increase in permeability, which is another way of saying as you age, you get more and more leaky gut, right? Your gut becomes more leaky as you age, your microbiome changes, and that's a big component of aging. So a big part of anti-aging has to deal with the health of your microbiome. It has to. It cannot be ignored. And the health of your skin is determined by the health of your microbiome. The health of your skin is determined by the health of your insulin system, right? So that's why anti-aging, it plays a big role in terms of even the health of your skin, which, again, we'll get into a lot of that next week. But so we talked about the increase in insulin resistance. We talked about the increase in permeability. Now let's talk about the decrease, and this is a big thing as well. And this is often underrated, and this is something we don't talk nearly enough about, but it's the natural decrease in enzymes that occurs as we age and the effect that has on us. So I'll maybe talk about that, what happens as we start to lose these digestive enzymes as we get older.
Yeah, well, you're not secreting near as much amylase, protease, lipase. So the very foods that you've always eaten, without the amount of enzymes and the benefits of the enzymes, how they micro-size. Think of enzymes as micro-sizing your food, right? To break it down to the nutrients that you need and that you need to absorb, you better be breaking them down.
And they
properly.
always talk about you are what you eat, and that's not necessarily true. It's you are what you absorb, right? You can eat a lot of these things, but if you're not absorbing them, that's a problem. And what are some of the key nutrients that as a person ages, they end up getting, even if they're getting it in their diet, they're not absorbing it as well? What are some of the key nutrients that they end up basically having a malabsorption problem?
Well, ordinarily, you're not. Let's talk macros for a second. If you're looking at protein, they usually don't break their protein down as well. So that's a macro. They might not be absorbing their fat as well. And those are two. In terms of minerals, I find just because we don't guess in the office, we test low levels of magnesium, low levels of B12, vitamin B12, very essential as an anti-aging vitamin is B12. Very low levels of vitamin D. And again, the absorption of vitamin D it's a fat-soluble vitamin. It's a very important vitamin as we age. So these are the things like magnesium, essential. Your brain doesn't work properly without magnesium. Your heart doesn't work properly without magnesium. Your bones, your muscles, your cells, there's a magnesium. It's a very important component of your cellular structure is magnesium.
Well,
right?
What percentage, you can only venture a guess, but it'd be a lot higher than people think it is, have heart disease simply because of a long-standing magnesium deficiency. Right? The health of your blood vessels have so much to do with your ability to get enough magnesium. The hardening of your blood vessels, same thing, right? When magnesium is out of whack, you calcify things more. So, there's so many aspects to it. So as you age, you produce less enzymes, you're breaking things down less, you're getting less nutrients from the foods that you're eating, and that contributes to quicker aging. And there's a lot of different theories on, is aging really have to do more with the fact that we have so many enzymes and we just, we don't eat as many enzymes in the foods anymore, right? Processed food does have no enzymes in them. A lot of the food we eat no longer helps us break it down. We have to use a lot more of our natural enzymes, which is why a big part of pretty much every digestive protocol that we have includes a good digestive enzyme as well, right? So, but that's a big aspect of aging. Your inability to get the nutrients from food that you used to get goes down drastically as you age. And throw in there any kind of digestive issue, and it just accelerates. And then they end up getting leaky gut faster, and then they end up aging faster. Then the skin of their health goes down. The health of their skin, goes down. The health of their joints goes down. Their brain health goes down. Their heart health goes down. And you can kind of see how you can accelerate the aging process, right? Now, that kind of leads us to what we call the accelerant of aging, right? Like, if somebody decides that they're going to commit arson, they use an accelerant, right? They kind of do something that's going to cause the fire to spread a lot quicker so that it actually burns down. So they you always see in these CSIs and all these television shows, they're like, here's where the fire started, and this is where the accelerant, this is the accelerant that they used, right? So there's an accelerant that happens in our body that literally speeds up the aging process, and research has shown convincingly that is inflammation. Inflammation is caused, a lot of research calls it the chronic accelerator of aging.
Yeah.
Nothing will age you faster than inflammation. And the interesting thing is, a lot of people, they talk about inflammation and it's this generic thing, inflammation. However, you and I like to talk about cause and effect. Inflammation doesn't just spontaneously appear like a magic trick. Inflammation is caused by insulin resistance, increased leaky gut syndrome, decreased in enzymes, getting less nutrients, leading to inflammation, right? A lot of the things...
Oxidative damage.
Yeah, and let's talk about that next. There's a little bit of free radical. But a lot of things that we talk about are actually things that increase aging because they accelerate inflammation. You age faster because of two things: inflammation and free radical damage, which we're going to talk about in 1 second. And inflammation is caused by the things that we already talked about: insulin resistance, leaky gut syndrome, decrease in enzyme production.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Now, the other accelerant of aging, so there are two accelerants of aging: inflammation, and the second one is free radical damage.
Yeah, oxidation.
And, I love the analogy you use all the time about an apple, right? People always have a hard time understanding why are free radicals a bad thing. The science behind it is boring, right? It's an unstable, looking for an electron. It steals it from something else, causing damage to the thing that it took. That's boring.
Yeah.
The effect of that we see is cut an apple or take a bite of an apple and leave it on the counter for a while. The apple browns, it's rusting, it's aging quicker. That's what happens with free radicals. When you have too many free radicals, you age faster. Now, we have a natural mechanism in our body to fight free radical damage. The problem is we're bombarded with more free radicals than antioxidants we have inside of us. It's not a fair fight. We're surrounded by pollutions, chemicals, stress, sugars, foods, vegetable oils, oxidize this. So we
100,000 new chemicals since World War II have been created. Vast majority of them are in our homes, and they're in our the places we have work.
Yeah, we're breathing plastic. So they estimate that our body comes under attack by more than a million free radicals every day. So what's happening now more and more today compared to maybe 50 years ago is we just can't fight it off like we used to, because we just can't keep up with the amount of free radical damage that we come into contact with. So as a result, we age faster. Free radical damage damages cells. It damages your mitochondria. Your mitochondria is your battery pack of your cell. When your mitochondria are not working as well, or they're breaking down, or they're damaged, you get cancer. You age faster.
Yes.
You also get inflammation. So it becomes a catch-22. You have more free radical damage, you age faster. You have more free radical damage, you have more inflammation, you age faster. So free radical damage is a big, big, big part of anti-aging, which is why we love our Navitol. Navitol is one of the most effective antioxidants on the planet, which is one of the many reasons why we like our Navitol. But we'll talk about more about that next week. So free radical damage plays a big aspect of aging as well as inflammation. But one step before that are those other things that we talked about. But now let's just end off this episode talking about some of the hormones that are more common that people have heard about and what happens to those as you age. Now, for example, let's talk about, in women, the balance between estrogen and progesterone as they age.
Yeah, and it's just, obviously as you get older and women become perimenopausal or menopausal, it's very normal for estrogen levels and progesterone levels coming out of the ovaries to go down. It's just absolutely normal. However, if they go down in balance, it's always balanced when it comes to estrogen and progesterone. You need to secrete as much progesterone as estrogen. And when you get that out of kilter, and it often happens in perimenopausal or in that menopausal years. If they're balanced, good. I mean, they're going to come down, but they won't come down rapidly. Or the antidote to it is the progesterone, because most people, there's a lot of estrogen around because, your body is attracted to estrogen, ladies, because of all the things we talked about, even environmentally or whatever. But what balances that out is your progesterone, and that is something that will age you quickly if you do not have enough progesterone.
Well, and you know what's interesting, and I find this fascinating, is there's kind of a third party that's sneaking around on the outside that is just, and you see this a lot in women, it's looking to steal the progesterone. So they may be making enough progesterone in relation to estrogen, but there's something else that's stealing that progesterone, and that's stress. Mm-hmm. Because in order to make those stress hormones, you need progesterone. So it's robbing the progesterone. It's not...
From the adrenals.
It ages you faster. Stress, one of the many ways. I mean, let's look at stress. Stress kills your gut bacteria, causes leaky gut syndrome. Stress kills your ability to sleep properly at night, which ages you faster. Stress steals your progesterone, which causes a decrease or causes more of an estrogen dominance, really, and that ages you faster, right? I mean, so stress is another one of those compounding factors that's kind of sitting on the outside that can have a massive impact on how you age. If you're stressed, you're going to age faster.
Yeah.
You're going to have more free radical damage. You're going to have more inflammation. I mean, it's one of those things that just happens to happen. Now, what's interesting is that in men and women, testosterone decreases as we age. And as testosterone decreases, you have a hard time building lean muscle mass. And if you have a hard time building lean muscle mass, then, like we talked about last episode, your muscles break down faster, they waste away faster. So it's all connected. So you want to make sure that you have normal levels of testosterone. And you do that by lifting weights, by consuming enough protein, and there's a whole whack of ways.
Vitamin D.
Saturated fat
is
and vitamin D.
essential for testosterone.
Magnesium, zinc, saturated fat. That's another problem, right? One of the aspects of being scared away from saturated fat is it's killed a lot of testosterone in a lot of people.
Yeah,
right?
And a lot of people, like you say, and even just is the branch chain amino acids, because what happens for testosterone, people are getting away from eating protein. They don't get enough protein in their diet. They don't get what we call a broad spectrum amino acids that are found in meat. And a lot of people are cutting back on that because they think it's bad for them. That can have a detrimental effect on the amount of amino acids that you're consuming, right? So that's really important. And anyway, I mean, all those things are big factors. I find I can get people's testosterone levels up by increasing their protein, increasing their fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A and vitamin D.
Yeah, and it's interesting that's a big part of aging as well, right? You lose a percentage of testosterone every year. And I'll tell you, it's hard to lose fat when your testosterone levels are decreasing, right? So everything kind of compounds itself and happens. And then, of course, we're out of time. But, I mean, a discussion on anti-aging hormones without talking about growth hormone would be a crime.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about growth hormone is that as you age, you secrete less of it. And you really need that for everything from your heart health, brain health. Your metabolism relies on growth hormone. Now, one of the interesting things about growth hormone is that it's secreted at nighttime while you're sleeping. So when you're not sleeping well,
isn't that a big issue?
You're not secreting enough or nearly enough growth hormone. However, there's a nutritional hack that can help you secrete more growth hormone that we'll talk about next week, which is a tremendous anti-aging tool that you should have in your toolbox that we'll talk about in next week's episode. So we want to thank you for listening to this episode. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@martinclinic.com. First of all, if you're not a newsletter subscriber, go to our website, sign up for our newsletters. We talk about a lot of these things in our newsletters. And if you're listening on iTunes, we really appreciate it if you left us a real quick review. That would help us out tremendously. So again, thank you for listening. And be sure to tune in next week where we kind of summarize all this up, wrap it up, and give you our anti-aging protocol. Thanks for listening.